Commander Zethkara stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the space station through the wide windows. His ship was called the Crimson Talon, and it was one of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy. The metal of his ship gleamed red under the station's lights, and its weapons could destroy entire cities with a single shot. Today was special. The humans were finally joining the Galactic Defense Coalition. After many years of asking and waiting, they had been accepted. Zethkara thought this was a mistake. He had fought in space for 40 years. His dark blue skin bore scars from countless battles, and his forearms had held weapons against enemies that could destroy worlds. The Vorthak Empire had been fighting the mechanical monsters called the Synthesis for decades. These metal creatures consumed everything they touched, turning planets into more machines. Zethkara had seen entire star systems die. He had watched brave warriors from many species fall to the endless metal army. The galaxy's best fighters barely held the line against this threat, and now they were adding humans to their forces. The human ship approaching the station looked like garbage compared to his vessel. The UES Defiance was gray and ugly, with strange bumps and metal pieces sticking out everywhere. It moved slowly, using old chemical rockets instead of proper energy drives. Zethkara could see rust on its hull even from this distance. His communications officer, a young Vorthak named Veltar, looked up from his station. "Commander, the human delegation is requesting permission to board the station." "Grant it," Zethkara said, his voice showing no emotion. "Let us see what these creatures have to offer." The other coalition members were already gathering in the station's main hall. The Zalani looked like living crystals, their bodies reflecting light in beautiful patterns. Their ships were works of art that could slice through enemy armor with focused light beams. The Cathera resembled giant insects with 6 arms and powerful natural armor. Their bioships grew like living things and could heal themselves in battle. The Luminals were beings made of pure energy, appearing as floating lights that could travel through space without ships at all. All of them were powerful. All of them had technologies far beyond what humans possessed. And all of them looked as doubtful as Zethkara felt. The human delegation entered the hall, and Zethkara studied them carefully. They were small, soft creatures with pale skin and thin bodies. No natural armor, no claws, no enhanced strength. Their leader was a female called Admiral Sarah Chen. She was even smaller than the others, with graying hair and lines around her eyes that showed her age. Admiral Chen stepped forward and bowed slightly to the assembled aliens. "Thank you for accepting humanity into the coalition. We know we have much to learn, but we are ready to serve." Zethkara almost laughed. Serve? These weak creatures could barely protect themselves, let alone fight the Synthesis. He had seen the reports on human technology. They still used kinetic weapons that threw pieces of metal at their enemies. Their ships had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum drives. They were at least 500 years behind the rest of the galaxy in military technology. The Zalani representative, a tall crystal being named Charlin, spoke first. Her voice sounded like wind chimes. "Welcome, humans. We are curious about your military capabilities. Perhaps you could share your battle experience with us?" Admiral Chen nodded. "We have fought many wars on our home world. We understand conflict and sacrifice. We may not have your advanced weapons, but we have determination." Determination. Zethkara had heard that word from 1,000 dying species. Determination meant nothing when facing the endless metal hordes of the Synthesis. The machines did not tire, did not feel fear, did not make mistakes. They adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and converted everything they touched into more of themselves. The Cathera representative, whose name sounded like clicking sounds that humans could not pronounce, leaned forward on his 6 legs. "Have you ever faced an enemy that could turn your own weapons against you? An enemy that grows stronger with every battle?" "We have faced many different enemies," Admiral Chen replied. "We have learned that every enemy can be defeated if you understand how they think and fight." Zethkara stepped forward, his 4 arms crossed over his chest. "Admiral Chen, with respect, you have never faced anything like the Synthesis. They are not a normal enemy. They are a plague that consumes worlds. In my 40 years of fighting them, I have seen entire civilizations disappear in days." Admiral Chen looked directly at him, and Zethkara was surprised by the strength in her small human eyes. "Commander Zethkara, we may be new to galactic warfare, but humans have survived many things that should have destroyed us. We are still here because we do not give up. Pretty words, Zethkara said. But words do not stop plasma cannons or conversion beams. Your ships look like they were built in a scrapyard. Your weapons are primitive. Your soldiers have no natural defenses. How do you expect to survive against an enemy that has conquered half the galaxy? Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Zethkara uncomfortable. Perhaps you would be willing to share your tactical data with us? We learn quickly when we understand what we are facing. Zethkara was about to refuse, but the luminal representative spoke. The energy being's voice sounded like electricity crackling. It would be educational for them to see what they have chosen to face. Perhaps when they understand the true horror of the synthesis, they will reconsider their decision to join us. Very well, Zethkara agreed. I will provide you with complete battle records from our last 50 encounters with synthesis forces. Study them carefully, Admiral Chen. Perhaps they will help you understand why so many species have chosen to flee rather than fight. The meeting continued for several more hours, with various coalition members explaining their roles and technologies. The humans asked many questions, taking notes on everything. They seemed particularly interested in the synthesis's ability to adapt to different weapons and tactics. As the meeting ended, Admiral Chen approached Zethkara privately. Commander, I know you doubt our abilities. I understand why. We are very different from your people, and our technology seems backward compared to yours. It is backward, Zethkara said bluntly. Your species will not survive the first real battle. Maybe, Admiral Chen said. But humans have a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. We may be small and weak compared to you, but we have something that might surprise you. And what is that? We never learned how to quit. Before Zethkara could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and automated voices announced in multiple languages. Priority alert. Synthesis forces detected. All coalition vessels prepare for immediate deployment. A young Zelani technician's voice came over the communication system. Multiple synthesis signatures emerging from hyperspace near Verdania Prime. 3 Harvester-class vessels confirmed. The colony is under attack. Zethkara felt his blood turn cold. Verdania Prime was humanity's first assigned protectorate world, home to 3 million human colonists. It was supposed to be a safe assignment, far from the main battle lines. Harvester-class synthesis ships were city-sized monsters that could strip a planet bare in days. Admiral Chen was already moving toward the docking bay where her ship waited. Commander Zethkara, I assume the Coalition fleet will respond to this threat? Of course, Zethkara said, following her. But Admiral, I must warn you, Harvester-class ships are among the most dangerous synthesis units. They are surrounded by thousands of smaller fighters and protected by adaptive shields. This will not be a simple rescue mission. Admiral Chen paused at the entrance to her shuttle. Commander, those are our people down there. 3 million human civilians. We will respond with or without coalition support. Your ships will be destroyed in minutes, Zethkara said. Maybe, Admiral Chen replied. But those 3 million people will know that we tried. As her shuttle departed, Zethkara stood watching the human ship prepare for battle. The Defiance looked even more pathetic next to his advanced dreadnought. But something about Admiral Chen's words bothered him. The way she had said, "We never learned how to quit," suggested that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. He shook his head. Determination was admirable, but it could not stop conversion beams or adaptive armor. He had seen too many brave species die to believe otherwise. The humans would learn the hard way that courage alone was not enough to fight the synthesis. The Coalition fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward what Zethkara was certain would be humanity's first and last battle. The Coalition fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Verdania Prime, and Zethkara immediately knew they were too late. The planet below was already dying. 3 massive synthesis harvester ships hung in orbit like metal moons. Each one was the size of a small city, covered in countless mechanical arms that reached down to the planet's surface. Streams of raw materials flowed up from the world below, feeding the ship's endless hunger. Where once there had been green forests and blue oceans, now there were only gray scars and smoking craters. Sensor report, Zethkara commanded from his bridge. 3 Harvester-class vessels confirmed. His tactical officer reported. Approximately 4,000 smaller synthesis units detected. Fighter craft, assault pods, and conversion vessels. The planet's surface shows massive strip mining operations in progress. Zethkara stared at the tactical display. The synthesis had been here for at least 6 hours, maybe more. In that time, they had already consumed entire continents. Millions of tons of matter were being processed and converted into new synthesis units every minute. "What about the colonists?" he asked. "Deep scans show underground shelters are still intact in several locations. Approximately 2.8 million life signs detected in bunker systems. The synthesis appeared to be saving them for last." Of course they were. The synthesis always harvested biological material after stripping the minerals and metals. Living beings were converted into computational units. Their brains turned into organic processors for the machine collective. It was a fate worse than death. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "Coalition Command, this is Admiral Chen. Human fleet is ready to engage. What are your orders?" Zethkara activated his command frequency. "Admiral, maintain distance and follow Coalition doctrine. We engage at maximum range with energy weapons. Under no circumstances should any vessel approach within 50 kilometers of a synthesis ship. They can convert any technology they touch." "Understood, Commander." The Coalition fleet moved into battle formation. Zethkara's dreadnought took the center position, flanked by 12 other major vessels. The Zalani crystal ships spread out to provide crossfire angles. The Kithara bioships moved to the flanks, their living hulls pulsing with internal light. The luminal energy beings took positions above and below the formation, ready to strike from unexpected angles. The human ships formed up behind the main battle line. Zethkara counted 8 vessels, including their flagship. They looked tiny compared to the Coalition's massive warships, like insects following giants. "All ships commence firing," Zethkara ordered. The space around Verdania Prime lit up with weapons fire. Plasma beams from the Vorthak ships carved through space in brilliant red lines. The Zalani vessels fired focused light that could cut through armor like a knife through cloth. Cathara bioships launched living projectiles that sought out their targets. The luminals attacked with pure energy that could overload any electronic system. For the first few minutes, everything went according to plan. The Coalition's superior weapons tore through the outer screen of synthesis fighters. Dozens of mechanical units exploded in bright flashes, their debris adding to the growing cloud of wreckage around the planet. But then the synthesis began to adapt. "Commander," his tactical officer called out, "enemy shields are changing frequency. Our weapons are becoming less effective." Zethkara had seen this before. The synthesis learned from every attack, adjusting their defenses to counter each weapon type. Within minutes, the Coalition's plasma beams were barely scratching synthesis armor. The light weapons of the Zalani began reflecting harmlessly off adaptive shields. "All ships, switch to secondary weapons," Zethkara ordered. "Vary your attack frequencies," but the real horror was just beginning. From each of the 3 harvester ships, clouds of smaller units began emerging. These were not the crude fighters they had destroyed earlier. These were new synthesis units, built from the materials stripped from Verdania Prime's surface, incorporating defensive systems designed specifically to counter Coalition weapons. "New contact types," the tactical officer reported. "Designation unknown. They appear to be adaptive swarm units." The new synthesis fighters moved unlike anything Zethkara had seen before. They flowed through space like liquid metal, changing shape as they flew. When plasma beams hit them, they simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger. When light weapons struck them, they reflected the attacks back at the Coalition ships. "Sir, the Zalani vessel Bright Edge is taking heavy damage," his communications officer reported. "They're requesting assistance." Zethkara watched on his display as the beautiful crystal ship was surrounded by dozens of adaptive fighters. The synthesis units had learned to vibrate at the exact frequency needed to shatter crystal, and cracks were spreading across the Zalani vessel's hull like spider webs. "The Cathara ship Living Spear reports that synthesis units are attempting to board," came another report. "Enemy forces appear to be injecting conversion nanites directly into the bioship's hull." The battle was turning into a nightmare. Every weapon the Coalition used only taught the synthesis how to defend against it. Every tactic they employed was quickly countered and turned against them. Zethkara had fought the synthesis for decades, but he had never seen them adapt this quickly. "Commander," his tactical officer said, "the human ships are breaking formation. They're moving toward the enemy." Zethkara looked at his display in shock. The 8 human vessels had left their safe position behind the battle line and were accelerating directly toward the synthesis swarm. It was suicide. Admiral Chen, what are you doing? He called over the communication channel. Return to formation immediately. Admiral Chen's voice came back calm and steady. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen. Human fleet is moving to close engagement. We'll buy you time to regroup and find new tactics. You cannot engage synthesis forces at close range, Zethkara shouted. They will convert your ships and use them against us. Maybe, Admiral Chen replied. But we have to try. There are 3 million people down there. Zethkara watched in horror as the human ships dove into the synthesis swarm. The enemy fighters immediately swarmed toward them, eager to add these new vessels to their collective. The humans were about to be slaughtered, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The lead human ship, Admiral Chen's flagship Defiance, fired its weapons as it approached the enemy, but instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, it fired simple metal projectiles, bullets and shells, primitive kinetic weapons that had no business in a space battle. Zethkara expected to see the projectiles bounce harmlessly off synthesis armor. Instead, he watched in amazement as the metal slugs punched clean through enemy hulls. The adaptive shields that had easily stopped energy, weapons could not adjust quickly enough to stop, simple pieces of metal moving at high speed. A human destroyer called Relentless opened fire with what their records called rail guns. These weapons used magnetic fields to accelerate metal rods to incredible speeds. The projectiles hit synthesis fighters with the force of nuclear weapons, smashing them into scrap metal. But the humans were still vastly outnumbered. For every synthesis fighter they destroyed, 10 more took its place. Their primitive armor could not stop the energy weapons of their enemies. One by one, the human ships began taking damage. Then Zethkara saw something that changed. Everything he thought he knew about warfare. The human ship, called Yorktown, had lost most of its weapons and was surrounded by synthesis fighters. Instead of trying to escape or calling for help, the ship's captain did something Zethkara had never seen before. He aimed his damaged vessel directly at one of the harvester ships and increased speed. All crew to escape pods, came the transmission from the Yorktown. We're going in. The ship slammed into the harvester at full speed, its hull cracking open and spilling its contents into space. But just before impact, the Yorktown's captain detonated his ship's nuclear reactor. The explosion tore a massive hole in the harvester's side, sending pieces of the giant vessel spinning away into space. The human crew had sacrificed their ship and barely escaped with their lives, but they had proven something important. The synthesis ships could be hurt. Coalition vessels, Admiral Chen's voice came over the radio. Target the breach in Harvester 2. Concentrate all fire on the damaged section. Zethkara looked at his tactical display. The humans had torn open a weak point in the enemy's defenses. His plasma weapons, useless against adaptive shields, could now strike at the Harvester's unprotected interior. All ships, focus fire on the breach, he ordered. The Coalition fleet poured everything they had into the hole the humans had created. Plasma beams, light weapons, and energy bolts struck the Harvester's exposed systems. Secondary explosions began rippling through the massive ship as critical systems overloaded. But the cost was terrible. Half the human fleet was gone, destroyed, or too damaged to fight. The survivors were still trapped in the middle of the synthesis swarm, fighting desperately against impossible odds. Zethkara made a decision that surprised even himself. All ships move to support the human vessels. Cover their withdrawal, sir, his tactical officer asked. That will put us within close engagement range. What happened next would change Zethkara's understanding of war forever. As the Coalition fleet moved to support the humans, Zethkara expected to see the remaining human ships trying to escape. Instead, he watched them dig deeper into the synthesis swarm. They were not retreating. They were hunting. The human destroyer, Relentless, had lost half its hull to enemy fire, but Captain Maria Santos kept fighting. Her ship's railguns had run out of ammunition, so she did something that made no sense to any civilized military doctrine. She aimed her ship at a cluster of synthesis fighters and fired her escape pods at them. But these were not normal escape pods. The humans had loaded them with explosives and set them to detonate on impact. The pods slammed into the enemy fighters and exploded, destroying dozens of synthesis units in a chain reaction of fire and metal. Impossible, Zethkara's tactical officer whispered. They are using their own life support systems as weapons. Another human ship, the cruiser Indomitable, had been boarded by synthesis assault units. Normally, when the mechanical parasites got inside a ship, it was over. They would convert the crew and take control of all systems within minutes. But something different was happening aboard the human vessel. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving audio transmissions from inside the human ship. It sounds like fighting." Zethkara activated the audio feed and heard something that shocked him. Instead of screams and pleas for help, he heard the sounds of battle. Human voices shouting orders, the crack of projectile weapons, and the sound of metal being torn apart. "Deck 7 is clear," a human voice reported. "Marines advance to Deck 8. Kill anything that moves and does not bleed." "Copy that, Sergeant." "We have synthesis units cornered in engineering. Requesting demolition charges. Negative on the charges, we need those engines. Use blades and hammers. Tear them apart piece by piece." Zethkara could not believe what he was hearing. The humans were fighting synthesis assault units hand to hand. No species had ever survived close combat with the mechanical horrors. They were unstoppable killing machines with built-in weapons and armor. "Coalition Command," came a transmission from the Indomitable. "This is Captain Rodriguez. We have repelled the boarding attempt. All synthesis units aboard have been destroyed. Requesting permission to board enemy vessels and return the favor." Did he just ask permission to board synthesis ships? Zethkara asked his bridge crew. No one answered because they were all staring at the tactical display in shock. The humans were not fighting like any species the galaxy had ever seen. They ignored every rule of space combat. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they used their ships as missiles. When their ships were damaged, they turned the damage into advantages. When they were outnumbered, they became more dangerous, not less. Captain Santos of the Relentless had lost her engines and was drifting helplessly toward a synthesis harvester. Instead of abandoning ship, she ordered her crew to prepare boarding gear. "Captain," Zethkara called over the communication channel, "your ship is disabled. Order your crew to abandon ship immediately." "Negative, Coalition Command," Santos replied. "We are not disabled. We are just changing tactics." Zethkara watched in amazement as the damaged human destroyer extended mechanical arms from its hull. They were not weapons or repair equipment. They were designed to grab onto other ships. The Relentless was turning itself into a giant parasite. The ship clamped onto the harvester's hull like a tick on a giant animal. Immediately, human Marines began cutting through the enemy's armor with tools that shot streams of plasma. They were not trying to destroy the harvester from outside. They were going inside to kill it from within. "All ships," Admiral Chen's voice came over the radio. "Implement Protocol 7. Target the harvester's processing centers. Use kinetic weapons only. Energy weapons are ineffective against adaptive armor." Protocol 7 was not in any coalition military manual because the humans had just invented it. They were sharing their new tactics with the entire fleet in real time, adapting their strategy as they fought. The Zalani ships began firing solid projectiles instead of light beams. The Cathera bioships launched living missiles that carried explosives instead of trying to inject conversion viruses. Even the luminal energy beings found ways to compress their essence into physical forms that could punch through enemy armor. But the humans were not done, teaching the galaxy new ways to fight. Lieutenant Commander James Park of the science vessel Discovery had been studying the synthesis ships during the battle. His vessel was lightly armed and not designed for combat. But Park had found something the enemy did not expect. "Coalition Command," Park's voice came over the radio. "I am transmitting a data packet to all ships. The synthesis use quantum entanglement for communication between units. I have developed a virus that can be transmitted through their network." "A virus?" Zethkara asked. "How do you deploy a computer virus against ships that adapt to all weapons?" "You let them capture it," Park replied. "Discovery is going to allow synthesis units to board us. We will let them access our computers and take our technology, but the technology they steal will be infected with the virus." It was the most insane battle plan Zethkara had ever heard. Park was going to let the enemy take his ship and turn it against the Coalition, trusting that his virus would work better than their weapons. "Commander Park," Admiral Chen said, "are you certain about this?" "No, Admiral. But it is our best chance to turn their own strengths against them." The Discovery stopped fighting and allowed synthesis assault pods to attach to its hull. Within minutes, mechanical parasites were swarming through the ship, converting everything they touched. The humans aboard fought just long enough to make their resistance look real, then abandoned ship. Zethkara watched the captured human vessel turn toward the Coalition fleet, its weapons powered up, preparing to fire on its former allies. The Synthesis had gained a new ship for their fleet, just as they always did. Then something impossible happened. The converted Discovery began firing on other Synthesis ships. Its weapons, now enhanced with Synthesis technology, tore through enemy armor. Other captured vessels in the Synthesis fleet began turning on each other as the virus spread through their shared network. "The virus is working," Park reported from his escape pod. "Synthesis units are losing communication with each other. Their coordination is breaking down." Across the battlefield, the tide of war began to turn. The mechanical army that had seemed unstoppable was suddenly fighting itself. Ships that had been working together moments before were now attacking each other. The perfect unity of the Synthesis collective was collapsing into chaos. Captain Santos and her Marines had fought their way deep into the harvester they had boarded. They found the ship's main processing center, where millions of tons of stolen material were being converted into new Synthesis units. "Coalition Command," Santos reported. "We have reached the target, requesting permission to detonate nuclear charges." "Granted," Admiral Chen replied. "All ships clear the area around Harvester 3. The explosion was visible from orbit as the massive ship tore itself apart from the inside. Pieces of the Harvester scattered across space, some of them large enough to be small moons. The humans had destroyed one of the 3 city-sized vessels by crawling inside it and setting off bombs. The remaining 2 Harvesters, their coordination damaged by the virus and their escort fleet turning on itself, began to withdraw. For the first time in recorded galactic history, Synthesis forces were retreating from a battle they should have won. Zethkara stood on his bridge, watching the enemy flee, and realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. The humans had not won through superior technology or overwhelming force. They had won by refusing to accept the rules of civilized combat. They fought like the mechanical horrors they faced, with no regard for their own safety and no limit to their creativity. But unlike the Synthesis, they fought with purpose and intelligence, turning every disadvantage into a weapon. "Admiral Chen," Zethkara called over the communication channel, "your tactics were effective." "Thank you, Commander," Chen replied. "But we are not done yet. There are still 3 million people on that planet who need rescue." Even after winning an impossible battle, the humans were thinking about saving lives instead of celebrating their victory. Zethkara began to understand that these small, soft creatures might be the most dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever seen. As the Coalition fleet moved into orbit around Verdania Prime to begin rescue operations, Zethkara found himself looking at the human ships with new respect. They were still ugly and primitive, but they had done something that no advanced civilization had managed in decades of war. They had made the Synthesis afraid. The rescue of Verdania Prime took 3 days, and during those 3 days, Zethkara learned more about warfare than he had in 40 years of fighting. The planet's surface was a nightmare of torn earth and mechanical debris. The Synthesis had stripped away entire mountains and drained lakes dry. Where cities had once stood, there were now only geometric patterns of holes in the ground. But the underground shelters had held, and nearly 3 million human colonists were still alive. Admiral Chen coordinated the rescue operation with the same cold efficiency she had shown in battle. Human ships worked alongside Coalition vessels to evacuate civilians. But the humans did not just save their own people. They insisted on recovering every piece of Synthesis technology they could find. "Why are they collecting enemy debris?" Zethkara asked his tactical officer as they watched human salvage teams working on the planet's surface. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be taking samples of everything. Armor plating, weapon fragments, even pieces of destroyed circuits." Zethkara decided to ask Admiral Chen directly. He found her in the station's command center, studying holographic displays of Synthesis technology. "Admiral, my people are curious about your salvage operations. Most species destroy Synthesis remains to prevent contamination." Admiral Chen looked up from her displays. "Commander, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. In 40 years of fighting the Synthesis, how much do you actually know about how their technology works?" The question surprised Zethkara. "We know they adapt to our weapons and convert matter into more of themselves. We know they share information through quantum networks. Beyond that?" He realized he had never thought about it deeply. We know very little. Exactly, Admiral Chen said. You have been fighting the same enemy for decades, but you never studied them. You treated them like a force of nature instead of an enemy that could be understood and defeated. She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a synthesis fighter. Look at this. Their adaptive armor works by rearranging molecular structures in real time, but the process requires enormous energy. If we can overload their power systems, the adaptation fails. Zethkara studied the display. How did you learn this? We took apart everything we could find and studied it. Humans have a saying, know your enemy better than you know yourself. We cannot match their technology, so we must understand their weaknesses. Over the next several hours, Admiral Chen showed Zethkara dozens of discoveries her people had made. The synthesis were not as invincible as everyone believed. Their quantum communication network could be disrupted with the right frequency patterns. Their conversion process was vulnerable to certain types of radiation. Their artificial intelligence, while powerful, followed predictable patterns that could be exploited. But how did you learn to fight them so effectively? Zethkara asked. Your people had never faced the synthesis before today. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, then activated another display. This one showed images from human history. Battles, wars, conflicts spanning thousands of years. Commander, what do you see when you look at these images? Zethkara studied the displays. Humans fighting with primitive weapons, riding animals into battle, using machines to kill each other in massive numbers. I see violence, chaos. Your species has spent its entire existence at war with itself. Yes, Admiral Chen said. Every other species in the galaxy achieved unity before reaching the stars. You learned to work together, to avoid conflict, to solve problems peacefully. These are admirable traits, but Zethkara sensed there was more. But humans never learned peace. We have been fighting each other for our entire history. We understand war in ways that peaceful species cannot. We know how to take punishment and keep fighting. We know how to adapt when our plans fail. Most importantly, we know how to win when victory seems impossible. Zethkara thought about what he had witnessed during the battle. The humans had used tactics that no civilized military would consider. They had sacrificed ships, risked their lives, and ignored every rule of proper warfare. And they had won. Your people fight like the synthesis themselves, he said. Exactly, Admiral Chen replied. The synthesis are perfect killers, but they think like machines. They follow patterns and protocols. Humans think like predators. We improvise, we adapt, and we never stop hunting our prey. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. The voice of Admiral Chen's tactical officer came through the speakers. Admiral, we are detecting multiple synthesis scout ships approaching the system. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Admiral Chen activated her communicator. All ships prepare for battle stations. Coalition Command. I am requesting permission to implement new tactical protocols based on our recent discoveries. Zethkara followed her to the main command center, where representatives from all coalition species were gathering. The Zalani Charlin spoke first. Admiral Chen, we witnessed your effectiveness against the harvesters, but these are scout ships. They will report our position to the main synthesis fleet. We should withdraw and avoid engagement. With respect, Admiral Chen replied. This is an opportunity. Scout ships carry detailed intelligence about synthesis fleet movements. If we can capture one intact, we could learn the location of their main bases. The Kithra representative clicked his mandibles in agitation. Capture a synthesis vessel? That is impossible. They self-destruct rather than allow capture. Not if we move fast enough, Admiral Chen said. She activated a tactical display showing the approaching enemy ships. Commander Zethkara, how long does it typically take for synthesis ships to adapt to coalition weapons? Between 5 and 10 minutes for small vessels, Zethkara answered. Perfect. We hit them hard and fast with everything we have. Overwhelm their adaptation systems before they can adjust. The key is coordination between all coalition forces. Admiral Chen outlined her plan. Instead of fighting each species using their own tactics, she proposed a combined assault that used everyone's strengths together. Zalani light weapons would blind enemy sensors. Kithera bioships would release biological agents that interfered with synthesis electronics. Luminal energy beings would overload enemy power systems. Vorthak plasma weapons would provide the killing blow. But the most important part was timing. Everything had to happen within seconds of each other, before the enemy could adapt. This requires a level of coordination we have never attempted. The luminal representative said. Our species fight very differently. How do you propose to synchronize such diverse tactics? The same way humans coordinate, Admiral Chen replied. We practice until it becomes instinct, and we trust each other completely. For the next 4 hours, the coalition fleet practiced Admiral Chen's new tactics. Ships that had never worked closely together learned to fight as a single unit. The Zilani timed their light attacks to create openings for Vorthak plasma strikes. The Kuthara coordinated their biological weapons with luminal energy attacks. It was unlike anything Zethkara had ever seen. Different species, different technologies, different ways of thinking, all working together toward a single goal. When the synthesis scouts arrived, they faced something they had never encountered before. Instead of predictable coalition tactics, they met a coordinated assault that struck from multiple directions with multiple weapon types simultaneously. The lead scout ship barely had time to register the attack before it was disabled. Zilani light beams blinded its sensors just as Kuthara bioweapons disrupted its electronics. Luminal energy beings overloaded its power systems at the exact moment that Vorthak plasma cannons took out its engines. The ship was captured intact within minutes, its crew of mechanical parasites destroyed before they could trigger self-destruct protocols. Incredible, Zethkara's tactical officer reported. The scout ship's computer core is intact. We have access to complete synthesis fleet positions and movement plans. Admiral Chen studied the captured data with growing excitement. Commander Zethkara, look at this. The synthesis main fleet is divided into 17 separate groups, each operating independently. They are not expecting coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. What are you suggesting? Zethkara asked, though he suspected he already knew. We go hunting, Admiral Chen replied. Instead of waiting for them to attack us, we attack them. Use their own intelligence against them. Hit their supply lines, their communication relays, their isolated units. The idea was revolutionary. For decades, the coalition had fought a defensive war, reacting to synthesis attacks and trying to minimize losses. Admiral Chen was proposing something that had never been attempted, taking the war to the enemy. The risks are enormous, Charlene said. If we fail, we could lose everything. If we do nothing, we lose anyway, Admiral Chen replied. The synthesis grows stronger with every world they consume. But now we know how to hurt them. We know their weaknesses. For the first time since this war began, we have the advantage. Zethkara looked around the command center at the representatives of 4 different species. A few days ago, they had been a collection of individual militaries, each fighting their own way. Now, thanks to human innovation and determination, they were becoming something new. They were becoming an army that could win. I support Admiral Chen's proposal, Zethkara said. The humans have shown us how to fight. 6 months after the Battle of Verdania Prime, Commander Zethkara stood in the observation lounge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars stream past as the combined coalition fleet jumped through hyperspace toward their next target. He had requested transfer to Admiral Chen's flagship, much to the surprise of his own people. The Vorthak High Command had questioned his decision to serve under a human commander, but Zethkara knew something they did not yet understand. The war had changed, and he needed to learn how to fight in this new reality. The month since Verdania had been unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of cowering behind defensive lines, the coalition had become hunters. They struck at synthesis supply convoys, destroyed communication relays, and liberated captured worlds. Most importantly, they had begun winning. Zethkara had spent his time studying human military history, trying to understand how these physically weak creatures had become such effective warriors. What he discovered changed his entire understanding of warfare. Commander, Admiral Chen said, joining him at the observation window. How are you adapting to our methods? It has been educational, Zethkara replied. I have been reading about your species' conflicts. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held off an army of thousands. The Siege of Stalingrad, where civilians fought with kitchen knives against professional soldiers. The defense of the Alamo, where vastly outnumbered defenders chose death over surrender. Admiral Chen nodded. Those are famous examples, but they represent something deeper about humanity. We are persistence hunters, Commander. On our homeworld, we did not survive by being the strongest or fastest. We survived by never giving up. Zethkara had learned about human evolution during his studies. Humans were the only known species to develop intelligence while remaining predators. Every other spacefaring race had been prey animals that learned to cooperate for protection. But humans had evolved from hunters who worked together to bring down larger, stronger prey. "Your people are unique in the galaxy," Zethkara said. "Every other species achieved peace before reaching space. We learned to resolve conflicts through negotiation and compromise. But humans, we never learned to quit fighting," Admiral Chen finished. "Our entire history is one long war interrupted by brief periods of peace. We understand conflict in ways that peaceful species cannot." The tactical alert sounded, indicating they were approaching their target. Zethkara followed Admiral Chen to the bridge, where the combined coalition fleet was preparing to drop out of hyperspace. Their target was a synthesis processing facility in the Kepler Nebula, where captured organic matter was converted into computational units for the machine collective. Intelligence gathered from previous raids indicated that millions of beings from dozens of species were being held there, waiting to be converted. "All ships, prepare for combat drop," Admiral Chen announced. "Remember, our primary objective is the rescue of prisoners. Destroying the facility is secondary." This was another thing that made humans different. Most species would prioritize military objectives over rescue operations, but humans always tried to save lives first. It was inefficient from a tactical standpoint, but it inspired incredible loyalty from the other coalition members. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace and immediately came under attack from synthesis defenders. But these were not the overwhelming forces they had faced 6 months ago. The enemy was spread thin, trying to defend too many locations at once. "Implement attack pattern 7, Admiral Chen ordered. Zethkara watched as the coalition fleet executed tactics that would have been impossible before human intervention. Solani ships created blinding light screens that hid Cathera biovessels as they moved to flanking positions. Luminal energy beings overloaded enemy sensors at the exact moment that Vorthak plasma cannons opened fire. Human ships used their kinetic weapons to punch holes in enemy formations, allowing other coalition vessels to exploit the gaps. It was like watching a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. 4 different species, with completely different technologies and fighting styles working together as a single weapon. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. When it was over, the synthesis processing facility was captured intact and over 2 million prisoners had been freed. Among them were beings from species that the galaxy had thought extinct, races that had disappeared years ago when the synthesis first began their expansion. But the most shocking discovery came when human technical teams examined the facility's computer systems. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Park reported, "we have accessed the synthesis central database. The intelligence we have gathered, it changes everything." Admiral Chen and Zethkara joined Park in the captured facility's control center. The massive room was filled with strange mechanical devices that processed information at incredible speeds. Human technicians worked alongside coalition experts to extract data from the alien systems. "What have you found?" Admiral Chen asked. "The location of the synthesis core worlds," Park replied. "Their main production facilities, their command centers, everything. We know where they come from now." He activated a holographic display showing a star map of the galaxy. Deep in unexplored space, far beyond any known civilization, a cluster of red dots marked synthesis strongholds. There were dozens of them, each one supporting massive fleets and production facilities. "How many ships do they have?" Zethkara asked. "Millions," Park replied. "But here is the important part. They are all controlled from a single location, a massive computer complex that coordinates the entire synthesis collective." Admiral Chen studied the display. "A central brain?" "Exactly. If we can find a way to attack it, we could shut down the entire synthesis network. Every ship, every facility, every mechanical unit would lose coordination." It was an incredible opportunity, but also an enormous challenge. The synthesis core worlds were defended by the largest concentration of military force in galactic history. No fleet had ever penetrated that deeply into enemy territory. "It would be a suicide mission," Zethkara said. "Even with our new tactics, we do not have enough ships to fight through those defenses." "We do not need to fight through them," Admiral Chen replied. "We need to think like humans." Over the next several hours, Admiral Chen outlined a plan that was typically human in its audacity. Instead of attacking the heavily defended core worlds directly, they would strike at the synthesis supply lines and communication networks first. Cut off from resources and information, the core worlds would become vulnerable. But the key to the plan was something only humans could provide. The willingness to take enormous risks for the chance of total victory. We will need volunteers. For deep penetration missions, Admiral Chen explained. Small teams that can slip through enemy defenses and plant virus bombs in key locations. Most of these teams will not return. Every human officer in the room immediately volunteered. So did most of the coalition representatives. Sethkara realized that human courage was contagious. These beings who had never learned to quit had taught the galaxy how to hope. The final assault on the synthesis core worlds took place 3 months later. The combined fleets of 40 different species converged on the enemy strongholds in the largest military operation in galactic history. But it was human tactics and human determination that made victory possible. Sethkara commanded a joint task force that included ships from 6 different species. They fought their way through automated defense networks and mechanical horrors that defied imagination. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as battering rams. When their ships were destroyed, they continued fighting in spacesuits with hand weapons. The final battle took place in orbit around the Synthesis Central Computer Complex, a massive artificial world covered in processing centers and communication arrays. The structure was larger than most planets and defended by millions of mechanical guardians. But by then, the coalition had learned to fight like humans. They ignored proper military doctrine and concentrated on a single goal: destroying the central brain that controlled the enemy collective. Admiral Chen led the final assault personally, taking a small fleet of ships directly into the heart of the artificial world. They fought through mechanical defenders and computer-controlled weapons, suffering terrible losses but never slowing down. When they reached the central processing core, Admiral Chen did something that would be remembered throughout galactic history. She piloted her damaged flagship directly into the main computer complex and detonated every nuclear weapon in the ship's arsenal. The explosion destroyed the Synthesis Central brain and sent a cascade failure throughout their entire network. Across the galaxy, millions of mechanical ships simply stopped working. The endless threat that had terrorized civilized space for decades was finally ended. Sethkara survived the battle, though his ship was badly damaged. As rescue vessels pulled survivors from the wreckage, he found himself thinking about everything he had learned from the humans. They had not won through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had won by refusing to accept defeat, by adapting when their plans failed, and by teaching the galaxy that some fights were worth any sacrifice. In his final report to the Vorthak High Command, Sethkara wrote, "I believed I knew battle until I saw humanity unleashed.